Remember to live each day with the aim of becoming better and not bitter. All right, y'all. I'm so glad that each and every one of you is with me on the replay and in the live. Today we have a special guest. He is a brother, a fellow creator. This man has a lot of titles, but I won't spoil it for you, and I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Oh man, this is where I get to talk about myself. What's up, everybody? I go by Kid Casper. I am a Christian raptivist. That means a rapper slash activist. Mayia likes to chuckle because I say I'm far from a pacifist. Graphic designer, clothing apparel owner, taco enthusiast. Trying to think. I'm, most importantly, I'm a child of the Most High. You know what I'm saying? The gospel wasn't found in the Vatican, it's African. I'm a disciple of Christ above all things. And yeah, I'm just here to hopefully shed a light. She over here trying to plug me. Hopefully to shed a light on what it is to be in the existence of me, I would say. Sure. I don't know. Hopefully that covered everything for you, Queen Mayia.
Yeah.
Hopefully so.
Yeah, thank you for being here and telling us a little bit about yourself. Now, as you guys have probably seen from the title and the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about synesthesia and what that entails. So, Casper, first question out the gate, what is synesthesia and when did it begin for you?
So synesthesia is basically let me plug in a little bit of you like gotta educate the people and everything like that. So synesthesia in Greek, it means to perceive together. People who have disability are called synthetes. Synesthesia basically means that you have certain senses that pretty much intertwine with one another. So when you have stuff like, say for instance, like the sense of smell will be intertwined with the sense of sight. The sense of sight will be intertwined with the sense of sound. It basically, you gotta think about it like the world's biggest like Wu-Tang mixtape, but it's your brain. It's essentially collaborating with everything else. So, but as simple as for me specifically, in some instance, is when I hear sound, I see colors. When I think of a color, I think of a shape. When I think of numbers, I think of colors and shapes, and all that intertwines with my senses. And for me, I would say I've noticed this as early as 6 years old.
Wow. That was a lot of good information in terms of what it is and what people who have it are called. You mentioned that it started for you at age 6. What did it look like to your 6-year-old brain, and how are you navigating the world after noticing it?
So for me, it was a little weird for two different things. One, it's like I don't know if you ever like the best way to describe like what I've noticed synesthesia to be like me. Have you ever been like hit in the nose before and like your eyes get all watery, and sometimes you get like this weird sensation where you see like pixelations and colors and stuff like that. That same sensation you get when you hit your nose, I see that like all the time. The only difference is depending on how loud something is, depending on if I have like a migraine or not, will it be more, I would say like overly sensitized in a sense, where it's like the illustrations of different colors and everything like that. It could be a lot more, it could be a lot less, but it weirded me out, to say the least, because I was like, either I'm getting punched in the face a lot, or this is what it means to be my existence.
That's very interesting. And as you were kind of trying to describe what it's like for you, the closest thing I could think of is a migraine aura. And, that's like a pre-phase of the actual migraine attack. And some people see colors, some people see dark spots. You feel like you get punched in the face. So that's the closest thing that I started thinking about. And My next question, I want to know, because people who have different, phenomena as it relates to humanity experience at one time or another this feeling of, am I the only one with this thing? Or does anybody else experience this? Did you ever experience that or wonder if you were the only one with synesthesia?
I still sometimes feel this way, and that's only because synesthesia for everybody is differently. What I've come to find out, like when I tell people that, like when you feel an object and you hear a sound, and they don't get like the sensation that comes behind that. I think it's because it is a one of one condition. I would say everybody,
Hmm.
like I always tell people with synesthesia, it's like snowflakes. A lot of them sound similar and look like everybody else's, but none of them are like one another. So even with knowing and coming to find out certain people and even celebrities that have synesthesia, it still feels like I'm the only one that has this, because I have a or if we want for the video game people out there, I have a first person shooters perspective of what it means to walk in my shoes. So
Hmm.
it'll always feel like that in a way. But to answer your question lightly, yes.
Yeah. That's interesting that you mentioned, the experience of having synesthesia is unique to every individual. And I find that that's even true when it comes to disabilities and chronic illnesses. And something I like to do is do pre-conversational research and just see what's out there, who may have said thing that I'm researching. And the one that kept coming up was Pharrell, among others, Duke Ellington, Lord or Lordy, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Um, and in an interview with Pharrell, the guy who he was interviewing him asked him, like, do you consider synesthesia to be a medical condition? And in so many words, Pharrell was like, this is not a medical condition. It's just something I got, and it helps me, when it comes to music. And, there's a lot of people who have different versions of it, but I don't see it as a medical condition. How do you see your experience with synesthesia?
So it can be a tool in a sense, because like for as I mentioned, I make music. So if I'm making, like if I'm producing like a track or something, and or if I'm working on like my flow and I'm working on my cadence to how to like attack a beat, synesthesia allows me to use my senses to kind of correlate and collab with one another. So it's funny how you can't necessarily conduct it because it does what it does as your senses go, but you could
Mhm.
use it as a tool to tie things together. It could
Mm.
easily be used as bookmarks in a sense. Like I think to myself, oh, when I heard this song, I saw this color, this shape, and I tasted this sense. Like I said, it's very, very I'll say it's weird, especially for a first person's point of view. But it definitely helps me navigate once I like recognized it to be what it was. It was like, oh, this just means this. And just like anybody else's condition, whatever you want to call it, I call it we just tick differently.
Mhm.
Regardless of whatever you are dealing with, once you get to understand the language of your body, then you know the best way to respond to it. So once I understood what that language was, at least what my body was trying to speak to me, I knew it was the best way to not only convey it to other people, but especially convey what I need to myself and respond to myself.
Mm. You dropped some bars right there.
Oh
I
man.
like the word you use, convey, because convey, or to convey things, uh, gives you a bit of artistic license, because no two people convey the same message in the same way. To that point, um, you mentioned that you were a producer, but I think as I have known you, I've come to realize that your synesthesia has been an inspiration in pretty much everything you do in terms of content creation. In one area that I've seen it the most is in your graphic design. Even this hoodie that you can find at ghostthreads.com, as you can see, it has variations of different colors, and just like a wide array of artistic value. Talk about how you've incorporated synesthesia into the creativity process.
Okay. Well, so for me, it's when we're talking about art in itself, when you talk about graphic designing, I feel like anytime you draw any portrait, it's always to a point of reference. When you're drawing something, especially for like music, it could be, oh, I wrote this song because of this mood. For me, when it comes to art, it always goes back to like some sense of an illustration I've seen in my head. And a lot of that comes with my synesthesia, which is funny because like when, if you remember, like I don't know if this is actually still around, but like the games like Guitar Hero and stuff like that,
Mhm.
everybody's like, oh look, colors and sound and music. I'm like, my life. And and so for me, when it comes to like graphic designing, sometimes I'll curate an illustration based off of something I've already seen, and I'll incorporate different things to make this creation in a sense. And it could be, oh, I saw these shapes with this colorway from this song and then I plugged it into this. It could be, oh, this mood, and I heard and I felt this object and then this sound came to mind, thus giving off this feeling. And synesthesia, the inspiration is always there. It's just more so, how do you want to like kind of give it? For me, I think it is when I'm doing graphic designing, it's giving people a peek of what it's like to be inside my head.
Mm.
Not even just figuratively, but even physically in a sense, because I when people ask me, what did you think when you made this, I'm like, that. I can't even explain it, but that. um so yeah.
That's dope. That's dope. And I think it's cool that you have found a way to take synesthesia and incorporate it into things that you enjoy doing. When I'm talking to, other young adults, youth, um, adults of, kids who have a disability or some phenomenon related to their humanity, I always tell them, find some way to create around that. Don't try to avoid it, but try to create or find something that you're good at so you can tell your story. Because I think a lot of the times, when it comes to self acceptance of whatever it is you may have, it comes down to how can you incorporate this into your life in a way that makes it more palatable for you to accept first. Because when you're able to accept it, you're able to communicate it to other people and help hopefully educate and encourage others. Um, and to that point, I'm curious to know, because you've mentioned a lot of pros in terms of synesthesia. I'm curious to know if there are any cons or anything that comes with synesthesia that may be not so much negative, but maybe a barrier at times.
Being easily distracted. Sometimes when I am working on stuff, because it is always happening, you can't control it. So a lot of it is, trying to kind of get a grapple of it. I also have anxiety, so sometimes like the sensation in itself can be a bit overwhelming. That's what people don't see. They even
Mhm.
like in Hollywood's way of, you saw that with was it Empire, if I'm not mistaken, where Terrence Howard's character, Lucius
Mhm.
Lyon, develops synesthesia. It shows like, oh, you see the colors and stuff, but there's like a lot of moments that people gloss over, where sometimes a lot of the colors, it's like fireworks. Sometimes too much light and sensation, you'll get a migraine in a sense, and it makes you not enjoy the things that you should be able to enjoy. Meaning, like sometimes you will hear a sound and you don't like how a sound sounds because of how it looks in your head.
Mm.
And a lot of that comes into play. Especially if you hear music that you don't particularly like, and then you're
Mm.
like, oh, somebody had to release that song. Now I hate a square for the month of November for some odd reason. Like it could be, it ties its way into the human experience, which means that it has the good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. So I try not to say like even that I hate certain things about it. It's okay. I can appreciate it in a different way because it is what comes with the existence.
Mhm. That's deep, and, just to your point about recognizing that it comes with your existence and it comes with the synesthesia is important. I think our perspective on even, like, the things that we face in life, a lot of the times can contribute to how we even feel in response to those circumstances. So I definitely hear you on that. Uh, so we talked about some barriers or potential barriers, and you mentioned migraine. And for my audience, you know that I have chronic migraine disease, but there are different types of migraine. And I'm curious to know, with the things that you talked about, not so much as being negative, but barriers, how do you accommodate yourself in terms of the reactionary migraine to some of the things that you're exposed to? Um, and even just some of the parts of synesthesia when you hear a terrible song. How do you accommodate yourself in those moments?
One thing is definitely just being patient. Because because this is like I said, this has been part of my existence at least since I've noticed since I was 6. And
Mhm,
for me, like I mentioned that I get like migraine and stuff like that. It's with some of these things, it just like anything else, it's you have to find some sense of a grounding technique. For me, it is getting in the dark. And it's funny, like I'm wearing orange today, but I typically wear black. People don't understand when I say like black is like a safe color for me. And a lot of that could simply be because it's not as overwhelming to deal with all the sensations. And even like it's funny because like a lot of people think when they think of synesthesia, and this is why I don't really like how Hollywood covers it. They make it to
mhm,
be layered with only one thing, um, where they only think of sound. For me, it's like okay, cool. Sometimes even having like a touch of something that soothes me and everything like that, it collaborates with like other senses that I have, and it can where some areas where it can become overwhelming, there's other areas that soothe it and stuff like that. When I was younger, I used to it was weird. For some odd reason, like when I was younger, I used to like be like fascinated with like ears, especially like other people's ears. I don't know why it's weird. Can't really do that nowadays because I'm a grown man. I can get in trouble for that. But like when I was younger, I used to if I used to have like an anxiety attack, grabbing onto like my aunt's ear growing up, my aunt Tara's ear, it would like I would see like these certain like colors that would like come up, and then like shapes, and then what that would do, just the sensation of touch can sometimes what goes along with that. And like I might hear a song or might hear something else, I might hear something, feel something in itself, even smell something, which is really really weird. You just got to learn how to find ways to soothe the very things about it that does become overwhelming in a sense. So it's like playing with a Rubik's cube, but the Rubik's cube is your head,
mhm.
and just trying to figure out what combination works the best. So sometimes when I think the sensation of sight is too overwhelming, sometimes smell can ease me down. Like I could only imagine. I'll have to draw a picture for you, but even what I see when I smell like cucumber and mint, it's interesting. Like I said, it's very very interesting. For me to even put into words, we would don't have enough time. But but yeah, it's knowing that right up up down down combination at the end of the day.
I hear you on that, and it's kind of so. When I was in college, I studied, of course, kinesiology, and we get to the part where I'm in the psychology of sport and physical activity, and psychology in sports entails more than okay, how do you feel about today's game, or how do you feel about your injury? It entails like techniques to boost performance and kind of maintain mental health. And one of the techniques is, being able to visualize and kind of see yourself, if it's a basketball player, the literally step by step process leading up to when your feet touch that court, the step by step process of how you feel, like imagining how you feel emotionally after you make that 3-pointer. And it sounds like for you, you've taken that same approach and with synesthesia to the point where you have mapped out, okay, this thing, I know that if I do this, it's going to have this effect. So I'm either going to do that or not do that. Or I'm going to manage my migraine or this side effect from some other thing that you may be going through by doing this and this, or not doing this, and this will help me achieve this outcome. So I think finding ways to do that, regardless of what your disability or part of your humanity is, or even chronic illness, is important, because you will run into people who try to tell you how to feel, what to do, and they don't know the flavor of the Kool-Aid. As a matter of fact, if they were in the kitchen, it would be too hot for them. So talk about how you navigate unsolicited advice when it comes to synesthesia and even migraine.
So I just tell people, and you probably heard me say it just like this before, what would have scuffed our sneaks would have torn somebody else's Achilles.
Mhm.
But I try to apply that, and I try to use that sentiment and apply grace, is where people will, because they have a sense of privilege on the outside looking in, they will just give you unsolicited advice. They're like, oh, well, if you got a migraine, just drink some water. Have you been drinking water, man? I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't think, when I licked my sandpaper tongue to the roof of my mouth, I didn't think, oh, I need some water. It's try not to, I think for me, it's because it's an outside looking in perspective,
Mhm.
they don't know how hot it is in this kitchen. They don't know how I got this scuff on my sneakers, and they don't really know how to nurture my physical body. They really don't even know how to talk to it, but that's besides the point. And I think that has helped me to be graceful, educate to a fault, meaning like you can only tell somebody, and this can apply to anything outside of just illness or health by any means, is you can tell somebody so much about you and they have a bias on you until you start talking. Meaning like
Mm.
once you start talking, that bias needs to be relinquished, because at that point they think that they know you better than you do. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So you kind of just need to look at them and be like, and politely say, I said what I said, and you need to do with what I just told you what you can do with it. It's not my responsibility at this point.
Mhm.
So I've especially when it comes to my synesthesia, and I tell people like I just don't have it in me, because it is exhausting to kind of deal with it. The one way I describe it is like, y'all think that riding a bicycle you could fit 2 people. My synesthesia is like, we could get 3 people on this bike, I promise. So we could get 3 people on this bike, I'm telling you, it's gonna happen. And I try to not so much exert energy on those that are more so willing to listen, but recognize that there's a sponge and there's a stone with different people. And that usually allows me not to relinquish my peace when it comes to letting somebody into this part of my existence.
Wise words, sir. Wise words. And being that those words are so wise, I know it took some 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 things, some steps, some circumstances for you to get there. So tell us what helped you get to the point where you could have grace for people and where you could recognize who to give your energy to.
So just like with anything, it's usually with experience. For you to know how to swim in certain waters, you had to have touched certain waters, I would say. I have to explain, I'll explain to people, and not to be like overbearing in a sense. I'll explain to people like, eh, this is too loud, it's too sudden. Don't touch me. This is that and the third. I think the most annoying thing is once you explain what synesthesia is and you give like a little bit of a definition, people are like, oh, well, what does my voice sound like? What color is it? What shapes do you see? I'm like, bro, you asked me about how I was feeling and what came with it. I don't like this isn't the time for you to stop me in the sidewalks of Times Square and have me draw an illustration to how annoying your voice looks in my head. I don't got time for it. And plus you don't have enough money personally. So I just so I have I've had to especially once I found this out to be what it is, because though I've had this in my existence my whole life, I didn't know synesthesia to be synesthesia to me till I was 19. So
Mm,
as I'm trying to understand it, I have to recognize that other people, as I'm talking about it, don't understand it. So I think what it goes back to earlier what I said before, like just like with you with your migraines, the minute you start to semi understand how your body works, the better you are to convey and capitulate it to other people. So I just have to recognize with that because I'm still learning about myself, not only on a physical sense, mental sense, spiritual sense. You know, we both pray to the same God, and it's and I think once you get to understand, at least I'll speak for more so for me, the better I am at knowing who I am, the better I am at conveying who I am to other people. And that's with what I need, what I want, what I tolerate, in many different ways. So hopefully
yeah.
that answered your question.
Oh yeah. Amen to that. I think it's really important. I think sometimes even as Christians, uh it's popular to downplay information and knowledge. Because so much of what's out there now is more so anecdotal and how I feel. And we downplay knowledge to the point where when someone does know, like scientifically, emotionally, like know themselves and their conditions or their circumstances, we challenge them because it's not anecdotal enough and it doesn't match up with their specific anecdote. And so something I was just talking to on a podcast that I co-host, and the topic for the podcast that particular episode was having confidence with albinism. And the host asked me, he was like, so do you feel that confidence with albinism is important? And for those who don't know, albinism is a lack of pigment in your eyes, hair, and skin, results in no pigment, even though I'm African American. It occurs from birth in all ethnicities, racial backgrounds, countries, you name it. And it also is accompanied by vision impairment. But to that effect, I talked about how I didn't know for the majority of my childhood what incarnation I had. So so I
I
had to
feel that
really.
so strong. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like you have people either bullying you or picking at you, but you don't have the words or the knowledge to convey, hey, that's not who I am. This is what I have. And so I took it upon myself in middle school to, okay, I got to figure this out. So I did research and I started learning about my condition. That was like the first level. And that's where I really can relate to you because I think sometimes we think people have to arrive or we have to arrive. And I told somebody the other day, the perception of arrival uh, is inaccurate because as long as we are living and breathing, we can be growing, we can be getting better, we can become smarter, more wise, more active in the things that we're called to. So to tell somebody, oh yeah, you'll arrive at self-confidence. Self-confidence is a journey, not a destination. And so getting to a place where we have knowledge about our conditions or our circumstances is really helpful for confidence and being able to articulate who we are, how those specific set of circumstances affect us. And to that point, you mentioned you weren't really technically sure what you had until 19 when you got diagnosed. What was that diagnosis process like for you?
Um, it was like that aha moment, you know what I'm saying? Like it was like
Mhm.
when it was like in the Legend of Zelda when you open that chest and you get that item you've been like, I needed this. I needed this mug for like X amount of time. And it was interesting. It was overwhelming in a okay, cool. Now I have a name to it.
Mhm.
Um, and it definitely normalized my existence a lot more, I would say. And there's something that I wanted to like touch on that you said when you were saying like we've never necessarily arrived. I think it's
Mhm.
kind of weird that in our existence, especially whether you're dealing with some type of illness or condition or disease or whatever you want to call it or not, in the age of smartphones where even these things update and upgrade over time, these things become obsolete. You know what I'm saying? Like these become obsolete after a while. The ghost of Steve Jobs is coming for my XS Max. But we have to recognize that we do. We have to recognize that this is why, like I say, like for my moniker, King of Development, I'm updating all the time. My experience
Mm.
allows me to give me the answers to some questions I had before I had the experience. So I think sometimes when it comes to whether it's any condition for myself, it's understanding how it works. I had to experience it at some point one or another. So there is no arrival. I feel like the arrival is you arrive in that casket. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? It's like once you're finished, you arrived. You know what I mean? Just like you can't really tell a character's story until their story's been written. If it's still being written, the story isn't finished. So I think the development process is everlasting. Um, and that's just something that I would want anybody to know, regardless of what you're dealing with. It's gonna be hard until you're dead. It's difficult, period. That we shouldn't have to put a gauge on it for our own convenience or anybody else's. But it's gonna be difficult until while you're here. Um, you got to adapt with it, and don't be graceful to yourself while you're adapting with it. So sorry, I had to
Mm.
go backwards. I felt, me, I felt a little compelled in my spirit to go back.
Mhm. In the
Spirit came
words
out
of
my
this
bird chest.
sweatshirt, you better preach.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, you preached the whole sermon in that moment alone. And as you were talking, like even when it comes down to diagnosis, uh, there's so much stress just involved with getting a proper diagnosis, finding knowledgeable healthcare professionals who have that type of um, tact to convey information, whether they know it or not. Um, and so to that point, I'm wondering what the diagnosis process was like for you, and in terms of leading up to the diagnosis, because I know sometimes that can be a moment where some people are like, I don't know if I want to know the answer, and some people are like, I want to know the answer. I'm on the I want to know the answer side. How about you?
So for me, and I've told you this a couple of times, like I've had a couple of run-ins with different medical conditions and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
like, not to become stigmatizing for myself, I definitely was like, I don't want to find out was something else that's wrong with me. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Yeah,
that was
I
my
relate.
first thought. I was like, man, don't give me another doggone pill, another prescription, or don't give me another therapist or appointment or number, another phone number. I know you could appreciate this. If I had to call one more specialist, oh my gosh. And it's so for me, it was the angst of knowing that there is something that I just don't tick right, because I remember I would explain synesthesia to people that don't have it, and I would
Mhm.
either get two responses. They're like either somebody punched you in the face, like the first one I described, or oh, you just did some LSD or some acid, and that's why you're seeing what you. I'm serious, and I knew that was, and I knew that wasn't it. So it was having so many questions, um, not enough answers. Only certain people could answer these questions for me. So I had to go and get the diagnosis. The overwhelming feeling was definitely in the I don't have the answer, so I really want this answer. And just like how I mentioned earlier with the development and always adapting, I figured with everything else I already went through, I had a heart attack very early in my life. I was like, all right, well, you know what? With everything I've just had to like kind of talk about, it was like, you know what? I'm gonna adapt to this. I'm gonna find a way to pivot off of this. Somebody that plays basketball, sometimes you get when life throws you a pump fake, you gotta adjust. You gotta adjust to the offense to apply proper defense when it comes to certain things that we dealing with. And then even when you are defending somebody, you have to find the right pivot to throw your defenders off. So even with the diagnosis, I was like, okay, I will not be shaken. I will acknowledge that it is there, but I will not be shaken off of my post. And I will find the proper tools to exist with this, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. I like what you said and the illustration you used with basketball, because that is close to my heart. And one of the things that you mentioned was your stance. And for those who aren't, into sports, your stance, not just in sport, but in your stance in the way that you stand, in the line at Target, or the way that you maneuver in a crowd in New York City, all of that impacts you all the way down to a musculoskeletal level. And because my degree is in kinesiology, I see a correlation between the physical and how we can maneuver in daily life. And that is our stance, the way that we approach circumstances, like you said, really helps us, brace for impact, but not be so prepared that we don't allow it to impact us, so that we can, you know, process what's going on. You don't want to be brazen to the situation, because you're not going to learn. And then when something else comes along, you're still not going to learn. So it's just a repeated process of, getting hit and not being impacted. And I think it's beautiful that you mentioned, despite having that initial anxiety, which is very normal, you eventually took that anxiety and said, okay, I'm gonna become uh, someone who adapts to this rather than diverts from who I am. And that's important. Talk about how important it is for you to not just approach synesthesia, but even the other conditions that you have, from that position of remaining who you are, but allowing these things to be a part of you without taking over you.
So when people ask me about this question, when it comes to how do you deal with just anything, I say you got to confront it and acknowledge it. The word acknowledgement means to see something. If you live in a household with with multiple people, um, you want to acknowledge everybody that lives in that house. Like you yourself, I mean, you said you have chronic migraine disease, vision impairment. For you to not acknowledge all the things, and that's just two things that I know off the top of my head, but for you to not acknowledge everything that comes with the existence of Maya, meaning that you're just gonna let it exist without it being nurtured, which also means that it's existing and has its own separate identity outside of you. Not but I tell people that just like a child though, it needs to be acknowledged, because that thing is growing with you now. You know what I mean? That thing needs to be developed and refined and shaped just like you. So when you acknowledge it and you learn how to exist with it, I think that is super important. Because what ends up happening is, like when I say it starts to exist on its own, it's gonna try to navigate in your existence too and end up bumping into things. You like if you have a migraine, whatever you deal with, you can't just I got a migraine, because what's going to happening is that thing's going to end up bumping into other things that you already have to deal with. It's going to hinder other things that you try to do in your life. So for me, ignoring synesthesia or anything I have to deal with is the equivalent of like abandoning a child and just say try to survive.
Mm,
Um, you know what I
that was
mean?
deep. That was deep.
And it's
Abandoning a child.
Yeah, because not even that, but like going back to identifying yourself with this, like you ignoring a piece of you that is inconvenient is in itself abandoning yourself. You don't you need to be acknowledged and nurtured. And sometimes when it comes to any disease or illness, condition, or whatever, I feel like sometimes we think if we just ignore it, it won't bug me as much. And that's a piece of you, you know what I mean? That's a piece of you that needs to be nurtured and taken care of. Like, don't abandon that part of yourself. That's something that I have to do with my own self. Is like, I can either allow this thing to ride in the driver's seat of my life, or I could say, you're getting in the back seat, I drive, but I'm not going to kick you out and act like you don't exist either. You are, yeah, you're difficult. Yeah, you know I mean, you kick my back, you kick my seat when I'm trying to drive, but I recognize that you were supposed to ride with me. And that's just what I do with it. Is I have to acknowledge it, and I have to give it what it needs. And because if I don't, then I'm abandoning a piece of myself that is part of my existence. And how can I truly exist if I abandon pieces of myself to advance?
Yeah, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with that. We even in my own journey with chronic illness and them becoming debilitating, um, it's helped me to understand what it is, and for someone like me, you know, if you're watching this on the replay or even live, I experience not one type of migraine, multiple, and not, you know, it's not like, oh, maybe one day I have this one or one day I have another one. No, literally in the same moment, multiple, and sometimes from moment to moment, different migraines. And for the longest time, I thought I was some type of way because I would go to my specialist and be like, hey, this is what's going on. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if that's possible. And then I joined communities where other people are saying the same thing, and that feeling of, okay, I'm not just making this up, uh, was so relieving to me, and it helped me be able to get to a point where I could talk about it, and not feel like just because someone doesn't believe me that I should shut my mouth. Um, talk about how you have been able to just take all that you've learned, because I know we talked about a lot, all that you've learned, and then use your gift as a communicator to convey that message.
So I just so can you could you restate your question in a way that maybe I could understand it a little better? Because I was like, wow, that was a lot. I have no idea what I'm supposed to respond to on that part. So could you hit me again, my sister, one
Yeah,
more time, one more time?
yeah. So basically, I want to know, with everything that you've learned regarding synesthesia, was it difficult for you to get to a place where you could communicate that?
Um, I think it's case by case.
Hmm.
Just I think for you, you probably feel some sense of relief having a podcast because you could talk and you're like, I don't. It's gonna take you a while to talk back. I'm gonna get this off. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And so for me, it not necessarily. It's
Hmm.
every once in a while, some people, if I talk about it with, they'll ask me, hey, what do you see when you, or what do you feel when you feel this? It's it is case by case, but I think it is finding people that will humanize you opposed to otherizing you. Quoting Pastor Paul real quick, because after a while your existence will become somebody part of somebody else's existence too, because you play a role in their life. And after a while, even people will check in, but it won't come off as presumptuous. It will come off of a sense of care.
Hmm.
And I think that comes with just establishing, I'm gonna quote you real quick, relational equity with people. Yeah, I'm saying I gotta give you your flowers too. But I think when you just establishing some sense of a relational equity with people, and once that has been activated with spaces you apply with other people, it is easier to talk about. Um, but I think it's the first step of establishing that. I think it's weird. I mean, I don't know about you. I think it'd be weird to expect a stranger you just met, like say if I just go into like a 7-Eleven or something and just be like, hey, while you're getting a Slurpee, let me tell you about how I see colors when I hear sound. They're gonna be like, man, if you don't leave me alone, I'm trying to get my pina colada Slurpee, get out my face. Like, it's so it's recognizing that you are to only allow certain people to speak to you in a certain way. And it's also recognizing who you can speak to about this, because this is part of your existence. And if you want to coexist with somebody, it is that first step of establishing a sense of community with people. And that's with anything, I would say. But definitely with my synesthesia, I've learned some people are just not equipped to even deal with me. So whatever that
Yeah.
comes with.
Uh, to what you said, something you sparked something when you said that last thing that you said, and I've been kind of thinking about this as I've been an advocate for 11 years, um, and something I have learned along the way is that not your story is not for everybody. While you may advocate and educate anybody that you come in contact with, doesn't mean it's for everybody. Some people gonna do like the word and let it fall in the weeds. And some people will nurture what you said and respond to it. And so that's something I've learned. And to your point about relational equity and proximity, I want to know what or who has helped you to become better and not bitter in your process and experience of living with synesthesia.
So first off, I gotta give credit to the Savior, Yeshua the Christ, you know what I'm saying? Secondly, I would say music, honestly. Music is, I don't know why I said honest, like I haven't been honest before. Music is definitely something that has helped humanize my experience. Even though he been tripping lately. Finding out people like Kanye, people like Pharrell who redeemed synesthesia a little bit. But having different representatives, I think even just having representation and seeing them exist. I keep using the word exist because I think that we really don't take advantage of recognizing the human experience. But just seeing other people exist with synesthesia lets me feel a little bit more normal, but recognizing that what I have is not ordinary, but it still makes me extraordinary in a lot of ways. Um, and then also going back to my faith, God made me peculiar for a reason. I call myself a weirdo, not because to come off as stigmatizing, but just to recognize that I am one of one. And we have, go back to these devices. They print out X amount of device, like copies of this device, but your interface is different than anybody else's. And how you tick is different than anybody else's. And I think just celebrating myself through all the ways that I tick differently has allowed me to not be bitter in my existence.
Amen, amen, amen again. Well, that was a dope answer, and I appreciate you joining me on the podcast. I know it was a little bit different for you, but I appreciate
Sad
it.
bit.
I'd like to give you an opportunity to plug all your things that you feel like plugging.
Oh gosh. So I recently just dropped a fall collection on my website at ghostthreads.com. Ghost Threads, the ghost in Ghost Thread stands for God's heart only swells talent. I was telling Maya this. I might as well break the news on here. I was telling Maya this. I am getting back into music, which means I'm paying for distribution this week. Which means I'm ready to become everybody's grandmother's favorite rapper again. So that should be interesting. Other than that, man, I at the end of the day, I just want to advance. I just want to advance the kingdom in the streets, and what that looks like is just leading with love with people in every space that I'm in. I could care less if people know any Bible verses after talking to me. I just want them to know love, and then I want them to question, where does that love come from? That's what I basically got going on right now. But yeah, dropped a new collection at ghostthreads.com. I see my boy Glassman in the comment section. And yeah, just stay tuned with the podcast, because with my podcast, I kind of just narrate my life. Sometimes it's significant, sometimes I just ramble and rant about things. Yeah, that's what I got going on right now, I would say.
Hey, thank you for sharing. Definitely check out his podcast. I put a link to his YouTube channel in the bio, as well as his media company, Telelestai Incorporated. And I would like to say thank you to everybody, from the Black Girl Warrior to Glassman to Key, to everybody in the comment section, for being awesome and dope and interacting with us.
Oh, you got people
And
from Canada watching?
oh yeah, we international.
You got people from Canada? Okay,
Oh
all right.
yeah, we got people from Canada, the UK, a lot of places, and I appreciate every last one of you. And without further
Mhm.
ado, please like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend tell a friend, and remember to live each day with the aim to become better and not bitter. And I will catch you next time.